Well, let's now turn to the Director General of the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs, Professor Eghosa Osaghae, to discuss Tinubu's emergence, challenges and prospects for ECOWAS, as well as how he can address them. Good to have you join us on Newsday, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, just 41 days after becoming Nigeria's president and on his very first participation at ECOWAS, he's now the chairman, of the bloc. What's your take on that?
Hit the ground running. That simply says that, the resonance of his emergence as president of Nigeria is not only a domestic matter, it is a matter that the international community has been waiting for. So charity begins from West Africa. So congratulations to President Tinubu and to Nigeria on this great inauguration.
Optics-wise, it seems like a great show of strength for Nigeria as well, having a president with another such portfolio. With the personality and track record of President Tinubu, what do you personally think he brings to the job in order to make it a memorable one for the ECOWAS states in the next coming weeks?
In terms of President Tinubu's profile and deep experience, you would all know that Tinubu has been a Democrat all his life. In his political career, he has been in the trenches. He was a part and parcel of Nigeria's democratization struggle, and he was a key member of the democratization movement that saw to the end of military rule in our country. And he was one of those very first, pro-democracy advocates that embraced the opportunities on offer in our Fourth Republic and, went ahead to become the governor of Lagos State. And he has proven to be a good Democrat, a good political leader, and a man who has strong convictions on the kinds of things he should do. Now, it looks like, finally, the opportunity has come. And I want you to take note of the assertion that he made. Of Nigeria, he told his colleagues at the summit, "We are back." And that means that, he intends to put all of his experience and Nigeria's strong position into ECOWAS and into Africa, and indeed into global affairs. Don't also forget, that he has emphasized the foundational variable that democracy has become all over the world. He says, yes, it's a difficult process, it has its many challenges, but he has, together with his friends and his brothers who are heads of state and government, given a commitment to the fact that ECOWAS is determined to ensure that the unfortunate reversals that we suffered in this part of the world, in a few countries, would be redressed within the shortest possible time. And I think that that's the will, more than anything else, that we require to push forward. So in terms of the agenda that he has set for his chairmanship of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government, the accent on democracy and democratization, I think, is very crucial. But he has also added that, democracy would not work if it does not also help to bring prosperity. So he has, laid the foundations of this democratic new drive on the basis of economic foundations. Very solidly, he has said, we will need to look at our trade and, liberalization issues again. We need to have new foundations. We need to strengthen the private sector participation in our development process. I think these are the things that, would make democracy work for people. Democracy after all, has a material basis, and that's very strong. But all of this because the president has the experience that is required to ground democracy in a manner that would make it not only stable, but also effective and useful for all of the people of West Africa.
Well, now, Professor, the president said that ECOWAS will no longer accept coup d'etat in West Africa again. But what about the issue of seat-tight leaders and third-term agendas? Aren't these issues that, should also be discussed? Shouldn't these practices be abolished if indeed we are going to be protecting democracy in West Africa?
I wish, things were that easy. You would say abolish them. You're talking here of sovereign states. You're talking here of independent countries. So we need to have, a multi-track approach to addressing these kinds of issues. We need to persuade, the leaders in West Africa. We need to let them know that this is what is best for all of us. It's proven. We have had difficult transitions and difficult circumstances in many countries, but we're beginning to see, beginning with Senegal, for instance, that there are leaders who are ready to listen and who will do what is necessary for the democratization process. But the entire point is this, that democracy is not an abstract thing. Democracy is what people desire. Democracy is about empowering people, it's about strengthening them, it's about the prosperity of the people. That's the whole essence of democracy that works. So in these countries, we need to also deal with what the non-state actors, civil society, the human rights activists, all of the groups of women, of youths, and so on, what they are asking for. So it's, as I say, it's a situation that requires a multi-track process. You simply cannot sit down, even in the Council of Heads of State and Government, and abolish. What you can do is what ECOWAS already has. We have a protocol on good governance, the one that says, government can only be on the basis of constitutional rule. And that's what is supreme in every country. So the role of ECOWAS is to ensure that if we have digressions, from the protocol, we put all of our powers to bear, on these processes and see that we can have, the kinds of things that would address those situations. It must be holistically considered, but it also requires a lot of diplomacy, it requires a lot of persuasion, it requires a lot of, talking to. And it's a good thing that the leaders themselves are able to meet and to talk. Remember that in Guinea, in Mali, and even in Burkina Faso, ECOWAS has had, engagement teams. In Mali, that was led by our former president, Goodluck Jonathan. And so these forms of engagement, are encouraging to the countries themselves and to their leaders. But I think that when you have seen Nigeria's successful transition from one government to the other, and you look at the kinds of experiences we've had in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, we've had in Liberia, we've had in many more countries. These things should encourage the people of West Africa to take a strong position the way we did before. We need to renew, that commitment to democracy and democratization. That is how it is. So it's not simply a matter of abolition. You cannot abolish in that sense. You would need to work towards ensuring that these reversals don't continue.
And Professor, after the accolades, obviously come the challenges. And some of those challenges within these ECOWAS states is peace. Peace in the West African region, sub-region. Terrorism, we discussed the military takeovers and security. Tinubu did speak about preventative diplomacy, kinetic and non-kinetic operations. How persuasive do you think he can be in terms of gathering these nations and collaborating on data and information in order to keep everyone abreast and moving along with progress, and also any other challenges that you might see he might encounter with this new role that he has taken on?
The first thing, the most underlying perhaps, is credibility. There was a time when you had a dissonance between your claims to being democratic and the actual processes that you had in your country. All through West Africa and Africa, we've had those dissonances, we've had those contradictions. But this is one situation where if credibility was what you required, to lay a new foundation for the kinds of things that, would be capable of addressing the very serious issues that face us in West Africa, this is one time you can say Nigeria and our president, have credibility in large measure. So I think that, it's a goodwill that then comes from that credibility that would push the ECOWAS, further. The good thing is, ECOWAS has been the clear leader in Africa, addressing issues that, we consider to be our own issues. Since the days of ECOWAS has proven, that it is possible to get homegrown solutions, that is, regional solutions to regional problems. And, we have done a great deal of that, and one expects that, the kinds of antecedents that we've had in the subcontinent would be very helpful to President Tinubu's tenure as chair of ECOWAS. The point about the challenges that you raise is that those challenges have variables that are also beyond the control of just the chairperson, of ECOWAS. We need the cooperation of all of these states in ECOWAS. We need their buy-in to this situation. We also need to begin to bring in the non-state sector. The civil society in Africa, in West Africa in particular, is very strong and has been in the forefront of all of these struggles. The good thing is that, we have a network, a civil society network. We have youth organizations across West Africa. We have, women's associations across West Africa. We have the informal sector, which is very strong. And, in his inaugural speech, I thought I heard the president address issues of inclusivity, issues of a strong economy, issues of economic integration, and so on and so on. So I think that it is the awareness, the consciousness of the responsibilities that have been bestowed on him and on Nigeria at this critical moment when the whole world is saying part of the solution to the very serious problems across the globe would have to come from regional organizations. And I think that the new regionalism is given a new, if you like, some kind of reinvention with Nigeria's current trajectory, successful transition, and ECOWAS is welcoming that. So Nigeria's claims to leadership are credible, and Nigeria's leadership credentials are very credible. They are proven, they have been tested, and it's a good thing that, the chairman of ECOWAS has identified, democracy and stability as key to addressing the challenges that you talk about. Don't forget, I think that point should be made, that all through West Africa now, we have a stabilization force, which is like the successor to ECOMOG. And that force is in Guinea-Bissau. It may not be that prominent in so many places, but it is a useful thing to have. These days, we need a lot of cooperation, a lot of partnership, a lot of networking. Countries must work together. The days when individual countries, had all that they wanted, even the days of hegemony, those days disappearing. But Nigeria is ready, as the president has stated, to provide leadership.
Well, Professor, I would like us to speak, a bit more on the issue of seat-tight leaders. You recall that in 2017, we saw ECOWAS play an active role, in deposing then Gambian President Yahya Jammeh. At a point, they even threatened, to deploy troops into the country if it did not relinquish power. So I'm wondering if we can see more, probably if we'll see more of that under this new ECOWAS chairman in terms of, in his quest to defend democracy in West Africa. Professor, I don't know if you can hear me. I was recalling that in 2017, we saw ECOWAS play an active role in deposing then Gambian President Yahya Jammeh. They even threatened, to deploy troops if it did not relinquish power. So I'm wondering if we'll see more of such interventions, in African countries, in West African countries where we have sit-tight leaders, especially as this new ECOWAS chairman, which is President Bola Tinubu, seeks to protect democracy, to defend democracy in West Africa.
Maybe you repeat that. I didn't hear it.
Okay, let me repeat that once again. I said in 2017, we saw ECOWAS play an active role in deposing the then president of Gambia, that's Yahya Jammeh. ECOWAS even threatened to deploy troops if it did not relinquish power. And eventually he did, giving way to the president there now. So I'm asking if you foresee more of such, if you foresee ECOWAS playing more of such roles in countries where we have seat-tight leaders in their quest, to defend democracy in West Africa.
Now, I think that, you must be an advocate of gunboat diplomacy. From when you first said, can we, those kinds of things would be matters of last resort. But even as instruments of last resort, they are not things that you take as first option. Now, even in the worst situations in the world, Gambia, what happened in Gambia is certainly the outlier. It's the exception, it's not the rule at all. What I hope would happen in West Africa is that we build a culture of consensus. We build a culture of common understanding and appreciation of the values of democracy and democratization. And President Tinubu has already made the point. He says, it's not as if there are no alternatives to democracy, but there's definitely nothing that is as good as democracy. Everyone says democracy is the best form of government. And he has made that point very clearly. And I also like the way he has used the royal or collective we when he says, we would not, and so on. He's taking all of his, fellow heads of state and government along, and that's the way to commit everyone. So I hope that, West Africa would not become a place where we'll resort to those strong arm tactics, would be unnecessary. In fact, the whole value and beauty of democracy is that, we can arrive at, consensus, we can build, trust and confidence, and that's the whole essence of diplomacy. So take away Gambia. In fact, the Gambian situation is not as strictly straightforward as you present it, but there were all kinds of things, carrot and stick and all of those things that went on. But we hope that the situations that confront us today in West Africa are a bit more complex than the Gambian situation, portended. So we would need, very creative and innovative forms of backroom diplomacy, acts of persuasion, consultation and engagement to get through the things that we are doing. Remember that in the case of Guinea, for instance, there was a hardline position by the military rulers from the very word go, insisting that, where was ECOWAS when, the problems of Guinea, were getting out of hand. You could have heard the same sentiments expressed in Mali. But, when we say that democracy, is the point on which we stand, and we are able to also involve the non-state actors in civil society and, all the citizens of the region, I think that, we are likely to do a lot better than we have done, and we are doing, yes.
Professor Eghosa Osaghae, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and for sharing with us your thoughts on this subject.